believes somebody may be inside the house. She's in the trailer. She believes the subjects are inside the house. There's 5 adults and 1 baby. She can still hear the shot.
Shot execution style.
What we have since learned through forensics, that it was clear that the shooters stood over the top of the 16-year-old mother and fired rounds into her head. The 10-month-old infant also suffered from the same attack.
They are members of the Perez family, and the other victims range in age from 19 to 72, including a grandmother shot dead as she slept. 3 survivors were able to escape harm by hiding during the surprise attack and calling for help as the gunman fired nearly 24 shots.
Just before 4 in the morning on January 16, 2023, a 16-year-old girl ran out of her family's house in a small farming community in California's San Joaquin Valley, clutching her 10-month-old son while gunfire was still going off behind her. She made it to a wooden fence at the edge of the property, lifted the baby over it, and was climbing over herself when one of the men chasing her caught up.
Oh, they're still shooting.
They're still shooting?
Yes, hurry, please. They're coming back. They're coming back.
7 minutes after this first 911 call, deputies arrived to find 6 members of one family dead, ranging from 10 months old to 72 years old. What had actually caused it, as you'll see, wasn't some random act of violence or a break-in gone wrong. It was the sadistically planned, merciless final chapter of a personal feud between 2 families that had been simmering for almost a decade, rooted in drama, shootings, and a deep gang conflict that has been roaring in the state of California for decades. This is the story of the Goshen Massacre, one of the most evil crimes committed in the state's history. Goshen is an unincorporated town of about 3,000 people just west of Visalia, the kind of small farming community surrounded by orange and olive groves where everybody tends to know everybody and families have lived on the same blocks for generations. Among the rural peace of the Central California countryside, however, 2 of those families had spent years hating each other and living within a block of one another the entire time. On one side was Martin Perez, aka Shooter, who had the word crazies tattooed on his cheek. The other side of the feud was a man named Angel Uriarte, aka Nanu, who had the acronym GF for Goshen Familia tattooed on his own face. What exactly started the feud is unknown, but whatever it may have been, it's likely tied to gang allegiances held on both sides. When it comes to gang feuds, no state rivals California for the widespread violence between gangs. For what seems like the longest time, 2 Mexican prison gangs, the Norteños and Sureños, have been rivaling each other across the state. Goshen's few and far between gangbangers almost unanimously hold allegiance to the Norteños, including Uriarte. However, the influx of Southern Californians into the central part of the state looking for farm work decades prior had brought Sureños with them, including the Perez family, who were the only Sureños in the entire town. A local magazine later dug into the feud between the families and compared it outright to the Hatfields and the McCoys, and that was for good reason. In 2014, Uriarte was arrested for shooting at the girlfriend of Eladio Perez Jr., Martin's brother, as she was getting out of a car. Eladio told deputies at the time his family had that same extensive history and feud with Uriarte, though he said he'd personally tried to stay out of it, and that he figured whoever fired those shots had actually been gunning for his brother. Uriarte was also accused separately of shooting up the Perez grandmother's house from a passing car years before that. He pleaded no contest to assault with a firearm in 2015 and did 5 of a 7-year sentence. The conflict between them escalated within the prison system, where both rivals were locked up from time to time with each other and answered to their feuding prison gangs behind bars. When Uriarte got out, none of it had been resolved. They just went back to living minutes apart in a town small enough that running into each other wasn't a question of if, but when. By 2023, the Perez household on Harvest Avenue was a tangled, multi-generational compound built around 72-year-old Rosa Perez, the matriarch. Living there were her son Eladio, Eladio's 19-year-old son Marcos, 49-year-old Jennifer Anala, who'd been with Rosa's other son Martin for years, and Martin's 16-year-old daughter Alyssa, along with Alyssa's 10-month-old son, Nicholas. Their home had a documented history with the law that went well beyond the feud. On January 3rd, less than 2 weeks before the massacre, deputies came by on a parole compliance check looking for Martin and found Eladio instead. They arrested him after finding an AR rifle, a handgun, ammunition, body armor, meth, and marijuana in a trailer on the property. He posted bail 4 days later and went home, like nothing had happened. Alyssa somehow had a life that existed almost entirely outside of all this. Her family was full of criminal histories, namely Martin and Eladio, who'd been arrested several times before for a slew of crimes. Despite this, she had a brief reprieve from that environment. She met a boy named Shane Maupin when she was 14 and he was 15, up in the tiny town of Alturas in far northern California, where she'd briefly lived with her great-grandfather after he was awarded custody of her and her siblings in 2019. Co-workers of Shane's at a restaurant called Antonio's remembered him constantly on the phone in the evenings, talking about getting custody of his son. A family friend named Valerie Gensel remembered Alyssa as bright and shy, the kind of girl who liked dressing Shane up, who'd walk to the park with him and bring snacks, who jumped on a trampoline with him in the snow. But within about 2 years, she'd moved back down to the Visalia area to live with her father's side of the family, living at the Peraz compound but leading a normal teenage life. Her son Nicholas had spent most of his 10 months on Earth in foster care. Tulare County Child Welfare had taken him shortly after he was born. Shane used money from his restaurant job to buy bus tickets for the 500-mile trip to see him, sometimes with his own parents driving him the whole way instead. On January 13th, 2023, a juvenile court hearing returned Nicholas to Alyssa full-time under county supervision. Shane's mother had wanted partial custody herself and had told a social worker in the months leading up to that hearing that she had real concerns about the household Nicholas was going back into, specifically about Martin, who she said had threatened Shane's father and gone after Shane directly. A lawsuit filed later claims a social worker on the case had run a background check, found someone in that household had a string of felony convictions, and never told the juvenile court before signing off on the placement anyway. Alyssa and her son were reunited on the 13th. But she was with him for only 3 days. Angel Uriarte had had enough of his Sereno rivals living next door and had formed a plot with a gang associate named Noah Beard to get Martin Peraz. However, what they hadn't accounted for was that Peraz wasn't home on the 16th. He'd gotten on his Harley, taken 50 grams of meth to sell off in another town, and left. He would come back to Goshen later that day, but for now he was far away. As if by fate, barely after he left, Uriarte and Beard approached his home wielding handguns. While everyone was asleep, they approached Eladio first and shot him twice. Then they shot Marcos in the head. They found Anala sleeping and shot her too. Rosa, the grandmother, heard a commotion happening inside the home and was getting up to investigate when they shot her too. By then, Alyssa had already grabbed Nicholas and ran. Security footage from the property shows the rest of it. She sprinted down the driveway toward a wooden fence at the edge of the property, lifted her baby over it, and was climbing over herself when Beard caught up to her. Both of them were shot in the back of the head as they lay in the street. At 3:38 that morning, the sheriff's office got a call about multiple shots fired on Harvest Road, and the dispatcher believed there was an active shooter loose in the area. Deputies got there to find a horrific scene of mass murder. They first encountered the 2 bodies outside the home before entering and finding another 4. Only one of the 4 victims survived the initial shooting, but passed in the hospital. Sheriff Mike Boudreau said later that investigators determined the shooters had actually stood over both Alyssa and Nicholas when they pulled the trigger. He went further than that too, saying every single victim had been shot in a spot that guaranteed a fast death, and that the whole thing had the hallmarks of the kind of execution-style killing you'd associate with cartels or high-ranking gang business. 3 people made it out alive. 2 women had been hiding in a trailer at the edge of the property the entire time. The gunman never actually went in, though one shot did hit the doorway. The third had been inside the house itself, listening to the gunfire move room to room, holding a door shut and hoping he wasn't next. The 911 call that brought deputies out there came from one of the 2 women in the trailer.
Oh, they're still shooting.
They're still shooting?
Yes, hurry, please. They're coming back. They're coming back.
Martin resurfaced in Goshen at around 7 p.m., unaware of what had went down at his home. He went to his second girlfriend's home, however, not straight to his, where investigators had been waiting. After getting Perez to open the door, police managed to arrest him and found meth-making supplies, and firearms in her home.
For a gruesome discovery in a small farming town in California, police say 6 people were killed, including a 16-year-old girl and her 10-month-old child. This happened in Goshen. Investigators believe they were attacked by a cartel or gang members.
The victims are here. Eladio Perez, 52 years of age. Marcos Perez, 19 years of age. Jennifer Anaya, 49 years of age. Rosa Perez, 72 years of age. Alyssa Perez, 16 years of age. And Nicholas Perez, 10 months of age.
Authorities in California are searching for at least 2 suspects after a deadly shooting rampage. 6 family members gunned down in a home in what investigators are calling a, quote, cartel-style execution. The deadly shooting happening early Monday morning in the small farming community of Goshen, about 30 miles southeast of Fresno. According to police, 16-year-old Alyssa Perez attempted to flee the violence with her 10-month-old child, but didn't get far.
It was clear that the shooters stood over the top of the 16-year-old mother and fired rounds into her head. The 10-month-old infant also suffered from the same attack.
Investigators say the home was well known to law enforcement for illegal activity, and the shooting may be linked to a possible cartel or gang. 2 weeks ago, deputies with the Tulare County Sheriff's Office arrived to the home with a warrant and found several illegal items, including drugs, ammunition, and a number of weapons.
It is very clear that this family was a target. But let me make this very clear. Not all these people in this home were gang members, and not all of these people in this home were drug dealers.
For weeks, no suspect was named publicly. The story of a cartel mass execution went wild throughout the state, fueling talks of immigration reform and criticism of California's government. However, those stories couldn't have been farther from the truth. The reward for the killers climbed from 10,000 to over 20 in just 2 weeks. Investigators landed on the Uriarte rivalry fast and managed to connect it to their respective prison gangs, although Boudreaux made a point to state that it wasn't clear what exactly caused the rivalry. On January 20th, deputies hit properties across Goshen and searched prison cells tied to the Norteño gang network across 5 different state facilities in a sweep they called Operation Nightmare. On February 3rd, Uriarte and a 25-year-old Noah Beard were arrested. Beard came in without a fight. Uriarte ran, then turned and fired at ATF agents who shot him in the torso. He survived and was charged from his hospital bed. A few weeks later, in a follow-up sweep tied to the same investigation, agents searched 97 homes and 23 more prison cells and arrested 26 additional people on gang-related charges. At a preliminary hearing, detectives testified they'd recovered jailhouse messages where Beard described the killings to a fellow gang member behind bars, reportedly explaining that wiping out a rival family in the neighborhood would, in his words, instill fear and eliminate a rival presence. Basically, that it would be good for business. In those same messages, he turned around and pointed the finger at Uriarte, suggesting Uriarte was too scared to own up to gang leadership himself. Both men were charged with 6 counts of special circumstance first-degree murder, plus weapons and gang enhancements. Both pleaded not guilty. Uriarte's attorney has publicly accused the county of poisoning the jury pool by repeatedly calling this a death penalty case in the press, despite the fact that California hasn't actually executed anyone in years. Boudreaux also went public asking Governor Gavin Newsom to lift the state's death penalty moratorium specifically for cases where children are murdered, a request that, as of right now, has gone nowhere. Both men have sat in custody without bail since they were arrested. The fallout went well past the criminal case. Shane Maupin sued Tulare County, arguing that child welfare workers and sheriff's deputies had a legal duty to flag what they already knew about that household before placing his son back into it 3 days before he died, but didn't. His attorney called it a pattern of indifference toward the lives of infants in the county's care, and the suit named several other kids who died or nearly died in the same system.
So shortly after this terrible event happened, I was contacted by Shane, who wanted to just explore his legal rights as to what had happened. He knew that the household that his son had been placed in was a very dangerous environment, that the social workers with Tulare County Child Welfare Services were aware that it was a dangerous environment, but proceeded to put him there anyway. So that was where our investigation began. Over the last 6 months or so, we've been gathering records in order to substantiate what we thought to be true, that they knew that that environment was dangerous for Nicholas, but proceeded to put him there anyway. There's no indication that the social workers involved in Nicholas's case after he was detained from Alyssa and Shane ever put their eyes on that home, which is what the law requires.